Oh, Bard. We all love you so much, but nobody ever wants to have to be the person to play you. You're so powerful. You make everybody stronger. You can affect so many different stats. And yet, everybody is too frightened to give you a try. Why is that? I suspect because they think the hill to even try the job is too high. I'm going to try to alleviate that today. Hey guys, Shuko here, and this is my Bard Guide. I have tried to do this so many times, and I've deleted it, and then I tried again. This is the one I'm going to be sticking with. I think I have all the information I need now to teach somebody interested in this job. So let's talk about why to play Bard. You would want to play Bard because, frankly, it is the most desired job, probably even more than a healer or a tank, in a group format. It is one of the 3 main support jobs in this game, and it is probably the most powerful of the 3 because of what it is able to change for others. However, it also isn't able to do the most damage because it's a support, but don't underestimate it. It can pull some pretty insane numbers. That's why you would want to play Bard. Now, let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages. The biggest advantage of playing Bard is that you'll get into more content because you'll be able to fill more roles, and usually Bard is one that's missing. Another advantage is you'll never find yourself short haste because you'll always have tools to give yourself haste and get yourself to cat magic haste. You have a dispel, you have a sleep, you're able to use clubs, daggers, and swords. You can pair that with a shield, or you can change your sub-job with dual wield and wield 2. There's a lot of options. You could be a defensive person with a healer sub-job or a magic focus sub-job and stay in the back lines. Or you could be a more aggressive Bard in the front lines and survive that. You could be somebody that plays songs and just stands in the back and does nothing. Those are the advantages to Bard, is its flexibility and its ability to buff everybody else up to astronomical levels. Weaknesses. It's never able to do the amount of damage that a full DPS is ever able to do. Its sleep and its dispel are light-based, and sometimes that's going to get ignored. It doesn't have the most amount of enfeebs. A red mage is going to kick its butt in enfeeblements. And, of course, its biggest weakness is if you are going to master this job, it is a long, long road. But that's just a mastery. Let's talk about trying to get your Bard ready for endgame. When would you want to bring your Bard into a group in modern Final Fantasy XI, a 119 eye level group, and tell people, I have a Bard. I'm willing to bring a Bard in, and you don't want people to laugh at you. Now, I can't speak for some servers. I hear Ashura doesn't let anybody in unless you have all 3 Raymas and everything else. But I can speak to people that know what they're doing and know how the stats in the game work. And if you know what you're doing, you'll be able to get into parties of almost anything except the absolute hardest content in the game with the setups I'm going to describe. I will also describe the proper elite things as of what we know now, and a new one has just come out. So, first, what would you need to have to be able to play Bard? Well, firstly, you're going to need a flute. There's a couple you could go for. The classic that everybody will know is called the Galar horn, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But for now, I would propose maybe you get something a little more basic. Maybe the Eminent Flute? The Eminent Flute is available for Sparks, and it has all songs plus 2. It's a good one to start with. And it's not something that people will laugh at you for if you know what you're doing. However, if you wanted to level that up a bit, the Eminent Flute has all songs plus 2. The next step up would be the Linos. It has all songs 1 to start. It's from the Luvian Skirmish. And it can be augmented with another all songs plus 2, getting it to 3. Then there's a bunch of other augments you can take the other 2 paths to. I like to go for fast cast and singing skill. But once you're done with it, you could even give it quad attack, weapon skill damage. You can change out your instruments without losing TP. So you can have a little fun with the Linos. But that would be the next flute. So these are essentially the 2 starter flutes. The Eminent Flute or the Linos. Next up, you would need a harp. There's a couple options. There's obviously the legendary harp, the Dardabola, but there's actually a couple other more reasonable ones you can go after. Aboru has one called the Terpander? I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, but I'll be putting a picture of that up on the screen. And that lets you play 1 extra song for a total of 3 songs. Another harp that lets you do it is the Blurred Harp plus 1 or the Blurred Harp regular normal quality. Both of them will let you get a 3rd song. So what you would wind up doing is putting on a harp with an extra song, playing pre-songs to get your extra songs, switching to your flute, and then playing what we call the potency set with your flute. They'll last longer, and usually because of all songs plus, they'll be even stronger. Now, we'll talk more about gear later and some of the more elite gear, but those are the 2 things that you need to have on Bard before anything else. You need an extra song harp, and you need a potency flute. So, we covered that, but where would you go next? For now, let's pause on that, and let's talk about some of the songs. I'm going to briefly describe them and not go into how many numbers and how much better each one of them are. Foe Requiem is a light-based damage over time spell. It does a teeny bit of damage every couple seconds in light. It's super useful to stick onto undead, and if your party wipes, they won't regenerate HP. They'll just sit there with the Requiem, sometimes for up to 13, 14 minutes. It could be quite interesting to play with, but otherwise it's just a very small amount of damage. But never underestimate a small amount of damage. Foe Lullaby is a sleep spell. It's light-based sleep, and it targets 1. Obviously 2 being a longer duration than 1. Once you get 2, I would stick with 2. But let's say you're waiting on recast, and you're in a panic to sleep something, you could switch to 1. Horde Lullaby is the sleep spell that's area of effect. Same deal with 1 and 2. Super useful. One thing to keep in mind with area of effect spells, if you play them with a stringed instrument and you have high string skill, they'll have a wider area of effect. So the Blurred Harp plus 1 is actually the best sleeping instrument in the game. Next up, Army Paeon. This is a regeneration spell, and it goes up to 6. I like to use these as my pre-set up songs. I'll usually just put on 1 through 4 or 1 through 5 on my harp, and then after that I'll rotate to my flute and actually do the songs that I want to play on my flute. But let's just say everybody's dead and waiting for health, or you have another bard and don't know what songs to play. I'm sure there's some situations for it. Mage's Ballad. There are 3 of them. They all regenerate MP. Obviously, if you can only put one on somebody, you would go with the third. But sometimes you can stick all 3 on mages and their MP will just go through the roof. Next up would be Knight's Min. Knight's Min is a defensive spell. It raises the defense directly of everybody. It's not super strong. There are 5 of them. It's nice using a pinch again when you have extra bards and you don't know what songs to play because there are already so many up. But it could also be used as the setup for the harp songs. Essentially, it's not usually a main one unless you're really confused about what stat to put that extra song on. Next up, probably one of the more popular song sets, Valor Minuet. This raises attack. This is almost always going to be on your bard set. There's a couple situations where you may not be playing this. I would at least have 4 and 5 on your main page. Next up are the madrigals. There's Sword Madrigal and Blade Madrigal. These are the accuracy for physical melee, and they'll raise physical melee accuracy for, swords and all that kind of stuff, but they won't really do anything for rangers and corsair shooting, or throwers, or, there's a couple other ranged options. But for that, you have the preludes, Hunter's Prelude and Archer's Prelude. So they each kind of get their own accuracy songs. Next up, we go into the Mambos. Noticing these all have little sets of 2. Dragonfoe and Sheepfoe Mambo raise evasion. Same kind of thing with the other defensive spells and the mins. Super useful, but you're only going to find yourself putting this in your set if you might have an extra bard. But on a ninja or a dancer or a thief, this can do some pretty crazy things. High evasion jobs can do some interesting stuff with this. Next up, you'll start to see Balabad. This has sleep resistance raised, or pastoral, poison resistance, Shining Fantasia, resistance against blindness, Scops Operetta. This is resistance against silence. Puppets Operetta, resistance against silence, probably a stronger version. Gold Capriccio, petrification. Warding Round, resistance against curse. Now, that's probably the only unique one in the list. Technically, white mages and a couple of other jobs can do resistance as the others. But curse is a rare one, so keep that in mind. Goblin Gavat, Bind. And then Advancing March, Victory March. These are your bread and butter magic haste spells. Usually you would pair these up to cap magic haste. If you have a red mage present or a geomancer present, or it's a short fight and a white mage is just putting up a 5-minute or 4-minute haste or something, you guys are smashing through something in a minute or 2, you only really need 1. But let's assume you're going for a while, you're doing an Odyssey run, you're doing a Swordy run, you're doing something that takes a while, and if you don't have an extra haster, you would play both. If you have somebody who has haste or haste 2, you only need 1. If you have a geomancer or a red mage, you may need none. They may want a completely different set of buffs. But usually you're going to be playing 1 march at least. There is another march, but that's a special situation and a legendary item, so I'll get to that later. Next up, the elegies. Well, if the marches make you move faster, the elegies make the enemy move slower. And Carnage Elegy is absolutely destructive. It's probably the first spell I'll cast on a monster at the beginning of a fight. And if it's going to be lasting more than 5 seconds. And it's absolutely destructive. Don't underestimate it. Some people are completely resistant to it, but otherwise, use it. Then we get down to the Etudes. And these all raise an attribute. You have strength, dex, vitality, agility, intelligence, mind, charisma. And there are 2 for each. So you can actually double up on these. Like you do agility, charisma, charisma, and so on and so forth. So what I would suggest when you get these is occasionally there's certain jobs a dancer uses charisma, ranged users use agility, and sometimes if you're powering up mages and you're in a mage party, you may want to be raising people's intelligence. There's times to not underestimate these. Or if you have a bunch of extra bards, there's all the songs are filled and you're playing strength attudes on your DPSs or dex attudes. A lot of people ignore these. And I can't tell you how many times I've set up an event and people are like, oh, I don't have that one. It's usually one of these. So don't miss getting all of your songs. You'd be surprised when they come effective. Next up is the carols, and they all have 2 as well. Fire, ice, earth, lightning, water, and then light and dark. Unique elements access for them. Very useful. And you get to the 1 through the 2. These will raise elemental resistance, and the second line raises elemental resistance a little bit less than the tier 1s. But as a bonus, they throw in a little bit of a chance to absorb. So usually if you only play 1, I suggest you play Carol 1. But if you get both, double is better. Just depends on, what the setup is, how many buffs are present, etc. Then next line would be the Thernades. So if the carols raise your elemental resistances in your groups, the Thernades lower the opponents. These are devastatingly powerful and not to be underestimated. Let's say a red mage is struggling to land in Phoebe. You can land a Thernade of the element that they're trying to land and make it way easier. You can raise the damage of a black mage or a rune fencer, all types of different things with magic, just by landing one. One key strategy that I use in particular often is I will have the Bard land a Fire Thernade 2 on a notorious monster named Zerde and make it even more weak to fire, and we just all spam everything fire on it until it's dead. This is super useful when it's effective, and it's the only way to win against very hard monsters. Next up is Magic Finale. This is a light elemental spell, or song, and it dispels. Dispels 1. Red mages are better at dispelling, frankly, but it's nice that Bard has an option, and it works on undead. Next up is Goddess Hymness. This gives everybody in the group re-raise. I believe it's the equivalent of re-raise 2 even, but you'd only use this in a panic situation. Let's say somebody did a terrible pull and all hell broke loose and everything's about to come crashing down. You might want to play this song. It'll help speed things up for the recovery after the wipe, especially with EP loss these days. Next up, you have Raptor and Chocobo Mazurka. These ones raise movement speed up to about 20%. They're great, especially in towns, etc. But a lot of times when you're in combat, you wouldn't want to waste a slot on this. If you have a Dancer present or a Corsair or somebody that can raise movement speed, let them do it instead. Maiden's Verily. Bard can actually charm monsters and they'll help you fight. It's a very interesting spell, and it's super useful. And you can sing it on people too. And enemy bards can sing it on you. It can be dangerous then. The risk is, when you play this song on an enemy, they're not going to drop items anymore. And sometimes that's very important. So be very, very careful who you use it on. So Srivante is an enmity loss spell, and it winds up being something that you would want to play on a tank. It's something that makes it so their enmity doesn't go down as quickly. I believe it specifically affects their volatile enmity, which drops naturally and just slows down the drop of that. Then Adventurer's Dirge is kind of the opposite. It's like having enmity minus 20 on everybody. I'm not sure if that math is exactly right, and I'm sure the potencies are different depending upon your potency, but it makes people hit the cap less quick. So when you're fighting something that takes an extremely long amount of time, like Dynamis Divergence, and hate is all over the place, playing the Faux Servante on your tank and the Adventurer's Dirge on your DPSs will save you a lot of headache. Next up is Sentinel's Scherzo. Sentinel Scherzo is a spell that gives like a 20-some% chance where you ignore 80% of the damage. Very useful defensive spell, especially for things that hit incredibly hard. It's usually that extra 5th spell a lot of the time. Pining Nocturne is enfeeblement that lowers the enemy's magic accuracy and makes their spells slow down. Bards don't have access to silence, so if you don't have a red mage or somebody that can land a silence, but it's a powerful magic caster, and then land a Pining Nocturne on them. They'll definitely make things a lot safer than if there was nothing on them or no silence. It also is stronger than Addle 2 when it's soul voiced. Well, that covers all the natural spells that a bard can get by themselves. There is 2 extra songs that bard can access now. One of them is called Honor March, and that requires this particular flute. It's the Aeonic flute. It's something you get after going through all the kills for the Aeonic. It's a challenging quest to do even to this day. But when you get it, you could use this flute, and when you wear it, you have access to Honor March. Now, Honor March is haste, accuracy, range accuracy, attack, and range attack. It is very, very, very strong. I would not underestimate it. So it's very worth going after this flute, even to this day. Now, the other song that you can access is brand new. So unfortunately, nobody's actually gotten it yet, but we know of its existence and everybody's currently grinding out that plays Bard for it. But keep in mind, these are legendary items and all of them are very hard to get. But the last song is called Aria of... We're just going to stick with Aria for now. I've seen 2 names in the translation data, but I believe it's Aria of Passion. And that will wind up raising physical damage limit. That's a new stat that came out, that when you're already at your maximum damage and your buffs and everything else are at the highest, and of course everything's all up there, this lets you hit for even a little more than what your limit would be. So this is going to be a very popular new song, but this has just come out and is linked to Swordy. In particular, the weapon you will need, and I'm going to try to pronounce this as best as I can, but it's called the Lognashad? Lognashade? We'll see, but I'll be putting a picture of that up on the screen. But that winds up unlocking the Aria of Passion. From there, those are the 2 unique spells or songs that you can get. But that covers all the songs that you can wind up getting. Let's take a quick moment to talk about merits. Now, for merits, not a lot has changed since some of the older guides for this. There's some argument over tier 1, and you could sit there and, change your finale recast for sure, lullaby recast. Those are valid arguments. Personally, I like to do minuet effect and madrigal effect, attack and accuracy. Those are songs that I play the most. And yeah, but there's arguments to be made for all of these, except for maybe Min. For category 2, Con Enema and Con Brio affect your defensive stuff. For spells, I wouldn't even worry about that. Really what you need is Nightingale and Troubadour. When these are both at 5 and combined, the magic accuracy of your enfeebles are almost limitless. The duration of your songs on your allies is doubled, and we call this effect Nitro when you pop them both together. So one example of playing Bard is called Super Buffs, and that would be popping Soul Voice, Clarion Call, or Clarion Call, might be saying the wrong name there. Then Nightingale, Troubadour, put on your harp, play all your preset songs, then switch to flute and play all your potency songs. And they would all play instantly, and you could go through them pretty quickly with all that set up. But that's how you would have your merit set up. For sub jobs, you have a couple of options. White Mage is probably your first go-to. It has all the Nas, it has a couple of cures. Bard gets access to lots of good mage gear. As you start to access master levels, though, Scholar would probably be a smarter choice. Then you get access to some damage spells, too. And again, they still have the mage gear. But that's something that I would have you consider one way or the other. Then, if you're being more melee, I'd encourage you to look into Dancer. You can put on a second dagger. You can help with heals with your TP if things start to go bad. And you can even add a little bit more job ability haste, 5% to everybody's attacks on top of all the magic haste you're giving everybody already. So Dancer's a valid one. Let's say you have to melee and it's very dangerous. Ninja's good, and you still get the extra weapon. There's a couple of other options that are valid. Let's say you're really focused on helping out the DPS. Warrior would be a valid option. They have Fencer, and Bard also gets Fencer naturally. And you just put on a shield and go crazy. Get the double attack bonus and everything. So there's a lot of different directions that you can take this. You can do Dragoon and jump the hate away. So I won't talk too hard about this, but if you show up on sub White Mage, sub Scholar, or sub Dancer, or sub Ninja, nobody's gonna really bat an eyelash if you know what you're doing. Now, we've talked about merits, we've talked about sub jobs, we've talked about songs, and I've shown you a little bit of the gear, and a little bit of the legendary gear. Let's start to get into a bit more of the gear. So, when it comes down to flutes, I've shown you the Linos, and I showed you the Eminent Flute. We talked a teeny bit about the Gallarhorn, but let's talk about it a bit more. At the moment, it's probably the easiest to get all songs plus 4, and it has singing skill plus 25 and wind instrument plus 25 with charisma 10. And that's going to be tough to beat. The finished harp that comes from the finished flute that comes from Swordy is very strong, but it's going to take a lot of grinding, even more than this one. So I would probably encourage people to go after this first. But that's one of the legendary weapons as well. And we've already talked about the Marseilles. The next legendary item is called the Dardabala. Now this comes from Abyssia, and this winds up, instead of giving you 1 extra song, like the extra song harps I showed you before, this gives 2 extra songs. Now there's a lot of time invested in killing 50 of this notorious monster, 75 of that, 50 of this notorious monster, and a lot of money for heavy metal plates. We're talking millions and millions and millions of gil and roast cinders. But it adds 2 songs, and that winds up giving you a total of 5 songs with your SPs or your 2 hours. So it is worth going after. However, with this new flute, the Lao Ganeshad, when it's finished, it gives you all songs plus 4 and 2 additional song effects. Essentially, throwing these 2 in the trash in some ways. So, that being said, depending on what content you do with your friends, and depending on how things go, and if they're okay with you running an Eminent Flute or a Linos and a Blurred Harp until you guys sorty enough to get your big flute, go for it, I say. If you want to skip this step of these, they're expensive and time consuming. But the one I would tell you not to skip, if you're only doing that route, you can't skip the Marseilles. It is amazing, and it adds a very useful spell that you could add to Aria of Passion too. That also being said, it's a big grind to get that new flute, so there's no shame in going after these old legendaries too. There is one other instrument I want to bring up, but I don't have it in my inventory, so I'll have to have that come up on the screen. And that comes from the Lotto. And it's a flute that has all songs plus 3, and it winds up setting song duration to 15 minutes. Now, that's not as good as any of the stuff I showed you as far as potency, but 15 minutes is a very long time. So if you find yourself crazy enough to win the Lotto on a mule or something, and you're like, I don't know what to give this mule, maybe consider giving him the flute. You'd have a pocket bard that's quite strong. But that covers all the instruments that I would consider using currently in this mode of the game in 2023 as I make this guide. Next, from there, you have instruments covered. You really just need a flute and a harp. But from there, you would want to get a potency set in your gear. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do this, and there's a bunch of different pieces. But the most important pieces of all are going to be the ones that give song potency. So let's go over those. The Empyrean head, at least the level 109, which is the not plus anything, it's just the Philly Kalat, will wind up having Madrigal +1. And sadly, that never gets upgraded the entire time, even all the way up to the +3. That just came out recently, but it's still a must-have. And you would want this to play on your songs. In addition, it has song spellcasting time, or fast cast 15. At this point, I have it. It's still up to like 11 or 12 when it's at 109. So it's an absolutely outstanding piece to have. Next up would be the Philly body. Same thing, Empyrean. And this one has singing and wind instrument skill for potency. And this raises minuet. This also has song effect duration plus, and that's super great because that makes the songs go longer. And sometimes the potency plus will do that too, depending on the song. Next up would be the Philly hands. Those wind up doing singing skill, string instrument skill, and wind instrument skill, and they raise March by 1. So that's excellent. And that's your haste spells. So then, next piece I would point to is from Ambuscade, and it's the Inyaga Shalwar. And this winds up having song duration plus 17% when it's maxed out. But even at the lesser stats, it has some good song duration and is a must-have. For the feet, the Brioso slippers have song duration on them, and they are the artifact feet. So it does take a little bit of time and effort to get these done and upgraded in some Omen. You don't have to go all the way, but wind instrument skill, song duration, really good stuff. Lastly, we have a couple more. The Ambuscade Cape has Madrigal, which is the accuracy and prelude +1. And then you can add, depending on what you're doing. In this case, this is a melee cape, but you could have a magic accuracy cape for enfeeblement and a charisma. There's a couple different directions you could take it. Double attack for melees, weapon skill damage. Another all songs piece that's very important to have is the Moonbow Whistle. Now, the normal quality of this can range from 200k to 2 mil depending on your server, and the high quality gets quite pricey, but I would heavily encourage you to at least get the normal quality. It'll help make sure that your songs have the potency enough that you're not having people ask questions about your barding too often, and it still comes out really good. But once these things start rolling and you're making good money through statics and Odyssey and everything else, this would be one of my first purchases, is upgrading this. It's an easy all songs +1. It affects everything. And even the normal quality, absolute must-have first. Even if you're broke, save up for it. But those are all the things that affect potency. Now there's a couple things I have on this set that affect my magic accuracy. So let's talk about those real quick. The Amurapi Shield happens to have a little bit of magic accuracy on it, and enhancing duration if I'm playing buffs for magic. The Kali is a 200 domain invasion dagger, and it's excellent. It actually winds up raising song effect duration, and you can dual wield it. And it has fast cast and singing skill and wind instrument skill and string if you choose that path. It is excellent to have. So definitely get at least one. But yeah, the Kali. Regal Earring is probably one of the top choices because it has charisma and magic accuracy, and it works in tandem with my artifact feat here for even more. The new earrings from Swordy has singing skill and magic accuracy. Good stuff. The sticky rings have magic accuracy and all magic skills, which raise all song, singing, wind, and string. So that massively affects your magic accuracy as well. And then on the belt, something a little easier to get and simpler, the Eshin Stone. There's a couple of other things you could get, like the Odyssey T2 belt. That would work as well. But I call this my potency set. If you had just this and a couple basic flute and harp, you'd be good to go. And even if this set was all in normal quality, it would be fine. Because you could practice with people, get the haste songs up and everything, and it would be absolutely outstanding. But this is a potency set that you would want to be going after. I'm going to show two other sets for Bard, and then we're going to move on. The next set that I'm going to show is the Fast Cast set. And this one is similar, but it's just to get myself to Fast Cast 80. And you can use a bunch of different pieces for this. I'll talk about it a bit. But you want to get to Fast Cast 80, and it'll wind up making it so your songs are pretty much instant cast. If you don't get there, it's okay. It's just going to be slower setting up your songs. It's going to take a while. And you can always have Nitro, for those quick 8 or so minute long songs, quick burst of instant power. But you want to get this set next after the potency. So, the head looks familiar. I was talking about that song spellcasting time 15. For body piece, I'm using a Warder Courage body piece with Fast Cast 13. You definitely don't have to use that. The Adiaga body, same set as the legs I was showing you for song duration, has even more Fast Cast than this. This is something I like to rotate into save in inventory. The Gendawitha gauges, these come from Skirmish 1.0, not Alluvian Skirmish, and they have Fast Cast 7. Then the Volte Brise in this case comes from Dynamis Divergence and have Fast Cast 8, which is really good, but they're really hard to get. So I would push you towards a couple different pieces. There's a T3 pants that have song cast time down. There's from the Promathia High Tier Battlefield, there's Fast Cast 4 pants. There's a couple different options you can go for on that. And then these feet are the Telchine feet. They naturally have song spell casting time -6. And then you can even augment them to get a little bit more. In my case, I got another 6. I also use these for my enhancing magic duration set. But let's a couple other fast cast pieces other than the armors, right? Let's look at some of these accessories. So I have the Feet Follette cape. And this with the augments through Odyssey has Fast Cast 10. Spell interruption rate down 5 as well, but Fast Cast 10. You could also do this through an Ambuscade cape and get 10 as well. A little bit cheaper too. I like this, again, save on inventory. I play a lot of jobs. The Embla Sash on the belt has Fast Cast 5, and it is 1,000 domain invasion points. Takes a little while to save up for this one, but totally worth it for all the mages and jobs that can use it. Next up is the Rahab Ring. This comes from a Guy's Fate, the Taru Taru. There's also the Prolix Ring you could get that has Fast Cast 2. The Kishar Ring comes from an Omen mid-boss and has Fast Cast 4% on it. A little bit of magic accuracy and some other fun benefits. The Isolation Earring has Fast Cast 1%. You could also use the ring from Walk of Echoes, which has Fast Cast 2 on it. I'll put that up on the screen. It's called the Enchanter's Earring, high quality. The Loquacious Earring has Fast Cast 2 on it. And there's a couple of other options for fast casting earrings as well. On neck, I use Oren Milla's Torque. This comes from Meeble Murrows, and it has Fast Cast 5. Another alternative would be the Fast Cast 4 from the Rama High Tier Battlefield. But mixing these up with the Kali, for instance, having Fast Cast 7, and other stuff, whether it be in your instruments having the Fast Cast, you'd be surprised how easily you can get yourself to Fast Cast 80. And Fast Cast plus Song do combine, so don't be afraid about mixing and matching. Lastly, I'd like to talk about my idol set just a little. We're only going to cover this just a teeny bit. Idol set needs to be defensive. You're going to be running in there, and you're going to be getting hit a lot, with magic at least, and sometimes physicals. You might pull hate from people when you try to sleep them. You may pull hate from people when you're buffing your team. There's a lot of times you're going to be getting hit. This is one of the reasons I like using a shield and a sword, or a shield and a dagger, or some type of incredibly defensive stuff. So, in particular with Odyssey out now, I would encourage you to go after the Niame set, and even the Bunzi set. As a bonus, the Bunzi set has double attack 8 in the hands. But if you don't have that, also go after the Yaga set, the entire ambuscading Yaga set, maybe a defender ring. I put physical damage taking down 10% on your ambuscade cape. You know, there's other stuff that you can put on from the Voracious Resurgance story. There's a Sandy neck that has 5 damage taken on the neck. There's ways. Get yourself your damage taken down. Get high magic evasion stuff like in Yaga. Yeah, this stuff is really great. It's amazing, you know? But at the same time, if you can't, get yourself something with high magic evasion. Try to get some DT as much as you can just to survive those hits while you're in the danger. Otherwise, you want Refresh to refill your Subjob's MP. I go with a melee in this case, and you'll see triple attack, subtle blow, double attack, some DT, accuracy and store TP, subtle blow, store TP and accuracy. The Sail Feed Belt. I love this one. It has Gear Haste 9%, triple attack, double attack once it's auged, and strength 15. It's amazing. And then the Ambuscade Cape, of course. But this would be a very good base melee set that you could still have some fun, help people get involved, help skill chains, and very rarely die, regardless of what weapon you use, whether it be club, dagger, or sword. Or if you're just using your instruments as a weapon that day. You have lots of options on Bard, depending upon what you're fighting and what the team really kind of needs. That being said, I want to give you a couple examples of battle. So we're going to point some of those out now. But lastly, I want to demonstrate one last thing for you. So we're going to move outside for that. A quick moment in my Mog House before we go out into Bastock and do that. I just remember that we still have to discuss weapons. Now, there's a few weapons that Bard can use, and I did talk about the Kali. And you could just have the Kali and never pick up another weapon for a Bard ever, and you'd be fine. But let's just assume you want to be a bit more flexible. I would like to discuss some of the other options. For clubs, they have access to the Daybreak from Lilith, which gives bonuses to light damage. Super duper duper useful. The Maffic Cudgel has physical damage taken 10. It drops off Titan high tier battlefield. Those are the only real clubs I would suggest. Staves, they don't have a lot of staff skill, so I would try to skip those. As far as swords go, there's only one sword you would ever want a bard to use, and that's the Naegling or the Kaja sword. You don't need any other sword on bard. Daggers, there is the mythic dagger. I'll put that up on screen. I don't have it. It's called the Karmanon. And the Karmanon is excellent. It increases song duration, and it does a lot of damage, and gives Aftermath multi-attack, triple attack, and double attack, and it's amazing. But it is incredibly hard to get. So unless you're taking Bard all the way, I wouldn't consider that one unless you're taking it all the way. It'd be the last legendary item for Bard I would go after, just to finish it. But it does exist. Another couple good daggers that they can use are the Turret, which is the finished ambuscade dagger, the Galetti knife, which comes off of an Odyssey T3, specifically the fish, the Imp2 Gandring, which is the prime. This is the level 2 at the moment, but it has 252 accuracy, 252 dagger skill. It will kill you if you keep it on for too long and not do anything. Turn-in dagger in high quality or regular. The Malevolence is one I like to use for Aeolian Edge in particular, and you can get this from Sinister Rain. The Aeneas is the Atlantic one, and I love that one for its TP bonus and store TP. It is my first legendary weapon I ever got, so it has a special place in my heart. The Relic dagger is also really good. I'll put that up on screen, but that's probably going to be a bit superseded by the finished Prime dagger now. Bards can also use the Twashtar as well, and that comes from the same place that the Dardabala would, Abyssia. And I'll put that up on screen as well. So these are all weapons that can be used by the Bard. I wouldn't use any or try to get in any range things or throwing things or anything. You never really want to take off an instrument or even put on an ammo for fast cast or damage taken or anything. Never take off your instrument. And then there's a couple other side pieces that I would bring up. Things that you can use for ballads, things you can use for mambos, the SU3 set pieces. Those are all things and a couple pieces of note, and some of those aren't so great. A couple of the other job-specific gear pieces, and those benefit certain timings like Nightingale and Troubadour, or the duration of Soul Voice. And you add a little bit more time to your buff windows and give you a little more stretch, because some groups are even going to try to get you to buff 2 full groups or 3 full groups. Or it can be a tough time being a bard, but people will love you, let me tell you. On that note, I just want to take a quick note with weapons there. Let's move back out to Bastok so I can show you guys how to do a proper super buff. Okay, so here we are in Bastok. I just want to do a quick little demo. Now, when I wind up playing my songs from my regular set without Nitro up, I pull out my thing for a moment, and then I play the song. So what's happening there is I switch to my fast cast set, and then I switch to my potency set, and then I switch back to my idle set. And I'll demonstrate the macro to you. Now, there are many people out there that make Luas, especially on FFXI, and I'm sure some of them are really, really good. For this particular guide, I'm trying to teach people how to make it without that. So for this case, you would see my equip set 1 being my fast cast set, and then with a Valor Minuet and a select target party target, and a weight 1. Switching into my potency set with a weight 2. And then equip set 74 would be my idle set back and returning. And this will only work if you're lock styled. You might have to add a second or tinker with some of your weights. But this is how I have mine built for all of my songs when they're not nitroed. So my whole main page here are most of the songs I would wind up playing. So Minuet 5, Minuet 4, Honor March, Victory March, Blade Madrigal, Sword Madrigal, and then for my melee stuff, Haste Samba, Healing Waltz, Divine Waltz, and Curing Waltz. I have a couple enfeebles in the down section, a Carnage Elegy, Finale, Nocturne, Requiem, Panic Re-Raise Song, Horde Lullaby 2, and then a couple weapon skills, Exenerator, Evisceration, Rudra, and Savage. And then if I go down a bit more, I wind up having True Strike, Violent Flourish, my Charm Song, the Mid, Sentinel, Enmity, Single Target Sleeps, Mazurkas. However you decide to set it up, the ballads. Then the way I separate it is, when I go up, I have my SPs, Soul Voice, and my other one, which I Clarion Call. I always mix them up because Siren gets one too. And then my Nitro, which is both Nightingale and Troubadour. And then a pre-song macro, which for me plays all my Paeons. And then when I would go over to these, instead of doing my other macro, I would just have the target of the song and the STPT, switch to potency set weight 2, and then back to my idle set. So that way there's no fast cat set. You can completely skip the fast cat set while Nitro is up. So then I have, what I would put up as super buffs. Very similar pages here, but it's just the songs. I can switch between flute, harp, sleeping harp, and then one time once I get to Lone Shade, I'll probably have that here too. In my Honor March macro, I have it switched to Marseilles automatically, because that's the only time I would use that flute. And then some other things I would hit, like Horde Lullaby 2 or 1, and then a couple of job abilities, which we'll talk about here. So Marcato is a job ability for Bard that winds up raising the magic accuracy or the potency of it. If you're using your Soul Voice, you don't need this. This would just be too much of a good thing. But otherwise, use this on Honor March or the most important song in the set as you're playing a Nitro set of songs, because it has the same reset as Nightingale and Troubadour. Then this one, Piantissimo, I call this one target, because if I'm playing a song on one target, I'll pop Piantissimo ahead of time. Usually used for ballading your mages or yourself. And then this last one, Tenuto, I call this song Stuck. This is if you want a song to stay on you and not get overwritten by all the other activity that you're doing. I don't use it often, but there's some situations, especially if I don't want to lose a certain song, like I want the accuracy song but nobody else wants accuracy, would be an example of using this. Other than that, I believe I've covered all the job abilities that Bard can do, but let's just do a quick double check. Yep, that's all of them, all the ones you would want to use. In this case, I'm sub-white mage, so I would have Divine Seal as well. Depending if you're sub-scholar, there's a lot of tricks you can do with that, and so on and so forth. But now, what I'm going to show you guys is what I would call super buffs. Now, nobody's here to have them, so it's just going to be me, but I want to demonstrate what you can do with it. So I would do Soul Voice, Clarion Call, Nightingale, Troubadour, back to back. Then I would hit pre-songs. And from there, Army's Paeon, Army's Paeon, Army's Paeon, Army's Paeon. Now I'm in my harp right now. I have 4, so I need a 5th song because I have the legendary items. So I'll throw a Blade Madrigal. Then from there I want to switch to a flute, so I'll do Honor March first since that switches me automatically. And now I'll switch to my G flute, because that's my potency flute. Minuet. Minuet. And then let's just say a second march. Victory March, and then potency on the Madrigal. Then from there, you can Piantissimo, a ballad on people. There's a couple ways you can manipulate that, but you would want to do it before Nightingale and Troubadour wear off. I went really slow just to explain what I was doing. As you get practice, you would want to go faster because some people are going to want some custom adjustments. There's also job-specific gear to make Nightingale and Troubadour last longer. Depending depends on how deep you want to get into Bard. If you're just trying to do it so you can help your Link Shell or your friends, and you just want to get a little bit in, there's no shame in just getting the flute, the basic flute, and one extra song. We call that a pocket Bard. So if you would just tell people, oh, I have a pocket Bard, a 3-song Bard, there's no shame as long as you tell people that ahead of time. And if you know what you're doing and you keep the haste songs up, people will love you. This is probably going to be it for the Bard Guide, guys. I could say a lot more about it. I'm going to put some links up on the top for some of the content that I've done on my Bard, if you guys would like to watch. And I definitely do a lot of melee barding, for sure, in a lot of my videos in the past. If you guys really want a part 2, definitely ask the questions that you would want in the comments, and I will be more than happy to do one, but I'm not entirely sure what would be smart to cover. I really just wanted to get you guys started and tell you how much it's worth it. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.